So I'm actually welcoming you to my home. Welcome to my home. We're right now in the hallway, and I'm going to give you a tour because I promised that this is going to be really practical. So no, this is not a sales pitch, and I'm not in the real estate agent industry, but I'm here to discuss today a mitzvah that really, as much theory and as much knowledge and as much wisdom as we can share about this mitzvah, really the best way to actually learn about this mitzvah is in action. And so what we're going to do tonight is see how we're gonna just maybe a little backwards. We're going to first take a tour of the how to with this mitzvah, and then we'll discuss the more of the deeper reasons and functions of the mitzvah and how to really keep this whole lesson super, super practical. So right now I am walking around. We're in the kitchen. And obviously the kitchen's a great place to start because, well, it's a Jewish home. So the kitchen's a wonderful place to start. But I'm actually talking about the mitzvah of Tzedakah. So we talked last week about how right when you wake up in the morning is the best time to focus on gratitude and moda'ani, and that is built in to the structure and the system of how we as Jews have been operating for thousands of years. Well, another very core, very fundamental mitzvah that also happens in the morning specifically and throughout the day and whenever we have an opportunity is the mitzvah of tzedakah. So very much a part of that mitzvah is that it should be, since it's so integral to who we are as Jews, and it's so integral to us, even if you look at this week's Torah portion, we're starting with how Abraham and Sarah, set up house or set up shop in the middle of nowhere to be able to provide food and lodging and drinks for those in need who are crossing through in their travels. So similarly, it's so a core value for thousands of years. Actually, in 2018, there a huge amount of money they did of charity that was given was Jewish philanthropy. And what I want to show you is because it's so fundamental and a part of who we are and what we do and how our homes are built and the conscious and subconscious messages that we want our homes, just like Abraham and Sarah, to be warm, opening, inviting, and there for others. We actually make sure, this is an initiative of the Lubavitch Rebbe, to make sure that a tzedakah box is actually a part of the home. In the kitchen, usually kitchen's all about what we're eating and we're sitting together and we're schmoozing and the family, right? And yet, what do we want? A part of the actual physical space is a tzedakah box. So we want that built in, that our very physical structure is already sending that message of giving and caring for those in need. And then moving along, I actually have, what we do is I have this beautiful tzedakah box that I picked up in Israel, right? And every time I see it, it reminds me of our trip to Israel. But the other thing I do is I always make sure there's coins right nearby. So whoever passes by knows at any given moment, they could stop using their right hand, because we always try to do a mitzvah with the right hand if you're a righty, and give a coin. That little clink in the box is a sign. And I actually found that it happens that sometimes we would, see it. And just like, maybe there's a cobweb you don't notice, or maybe there's a picture or a piece of art. Like, I think we all notice your artwork, but maybe that's not something you notice on the daily, right? So I actually make sure that this tzedakah box, it happens to be, we still know, and we still notice it, and we still pass it, and we still give every single morning before breakfast, before we run along our days, tzedakah is given. But as soon as I notice that we kind of start slacking off and we don't notice it anymore, I'll actually pick it up and I'll move it to a different location. So for a while, it was on the breakfast table, right where you sit and you eat, so that everybody could know, remind ourselves, here you go. And I always try to make sure the coins are filled, because one little coin, every single time you give it, it's an own individual mitzvah. Each coin that you give is an individual mitzvah, as an individual, as we talked about in the beginning, intentional and concrete connection, an opportunity for us to fuse, you said spirit and matter, and all the materialism that we have, we give the coin. So I'm gonna actually put it back where it belongs, or where we've been keeping it late as of late. And I will say that every single child of ours has their own tzedakah box in their own bedroom. And that's also when they wake up or when they're hanging out in the room, again, sending the message, stop, pause, Give tzedakah. Your home, your own bedroom, your own personal space is a space that needs to also be a space of giving. You know, I remember when we first moved here, we took the kids to a pottery place, and one of my kids comes running over to me, mommy, College Station has a whole row of tzedakah boxes in the pottery craft place. Well, sure enough, what was it? It was a bunch of piggy banks. But to my child, the whole notion of something with a slot that collects coins was clearly and obviously for others. So we're going to move along to the living room. And obviously in the living room, we're going to also have tzedakah boxes in different places, in different locations, because again, we want that value of tzedakah to be something that's always a part of our lives. And I just want to show you something that here we have tefillin bag, right? So men, every morning, they wake up in the morning, part of their daily routine is putting on the tefillin, part of prayer, part of connection. And all of my boys, this is one of the tefillin bags right here, all of my boys have in their tefillin bag, what do they have? Actually, you guessed it, a tzedakah box. And I actually have a family friend of ours, his bar mitzvah gift to the boys is a little pouch to keep coins in their tefillin bag so that at every day, before they start prayer, before they start thinking of all the things they have, or all the things they don't have, or all the things they want, or all the things they need, before they take moments to connect with Hashem for themselves, what they actually do is stop and pause, think of others. As a matter of fact, it's a tradition when we're making challah, right before you're making the bracha of the challah, which we'll talk about blessings a little bit more in a different one of our sessions together, you actually give tzedakah. Again, about to have delicious bread, sustain the family, think of ourselves, and we stop and we pause. And what do? You got it. We think of others, because tzedakah is a fundamental core principle of who we are and what we do. Moving along to the last room, because I'm actually not going to take you to the bedrooms, because those who are not in the living room are in their own bedrooms, reading or sketching or doing homework, relaxing, avoiding being part of the chaos here, part of our time here. So the last stop is here, my candle lighting station. And this is where me and my daughters every Friday, right? Welcome Shabbat, candle lighting. And we will definitely talk about, you know, candle lighting and Shabbat, a different, one of the wonderful Mitzvah Mondays that we get to spend together. But one of the things we do is on Shabbat, we don't handle money, right? Money is commerce and money is materialism. And Shabbat, we're not focused on all the things we need to acquire and do and commerce and earning. We actually try to focus on being, which we'll talk about later. But what we have right here, right again, near my candle lighting station, right before Shabbat, we have coins. And again, a little beautiful handy tzedakah box sitting there, quite full already. And also always coins ready. So we are mitzvah ready whenever we can. And we try that the whole home should really, really send the message. This is a Jewish home. This is a giving home. And what we do on Friday, instead of giving one coin, which is our daily, we want to at least give a coin daily, right? If I have $1 to give, or I have 100 pennies to give, spread that dollar out and give it over 100 days. So every single time you're engaging in that mitzvah. But we actually on Friday for Shabbat, we give 2 coins, because we're not going to give one on Shabbat on Saturday. And we want to give it before we light candles, before we welcome that day of peace and that day of rest and the day of harmony for ourselves and our family. Let's stop, let's pause, let's think of those in need. And now what we're going to do, so here, and give 2 coins, because we're not going to give on Shabbat day, so one. And also I should mention, candlelight time is an auspicious time, right? It's a time where we're really focusing on our energy in and thinking about our family and our week. And it's a moment of connection, a moment of prayer, very personal. So before we do that, it's a potent, powerful moment. We stop, we pause, and yes, we think of others, because that's so fundamental. So now what we're going to do is I'm actually going to put down the selfie stick, because I am not a blogger and I am not an Instagrammer and I don't really know how to multitask so well. But now I'm going to actually jump in. There you ladies are on the computer. I feel like that was more seamless than I could have imagined. I was like today, like, how am I going to do the walking tour and the sitting talking part? But somehow we, thank God for technology, we're able to pull it together, even without my IT guy, which is usually my husband. Okay, so now I kind of gave you the house tour, and I gave you the fundamentals of like, how do we structurally do this mitzvah? But like every mitzvah, there's a lot of like value in doing it. There's a lot of value and a lot of layers to the how-to of this practical and incredible mitzvah. And there's also a mindset and kind of like there's a habit that we form. And I want to share with you a story. So during quarantine, all of our children were together. So from March, when we brought this one home from Chicago, from New York, from Israel, everyone was home. We wanted them all under our roof. We did not want to take chances. And suddenly our youngest that are 11, right, as I mentioned, they're triplets, have all their big brothers home, 20-year-olds, an 18-year-old, the 15-year-old. And now we're negotiating, like many of us, new family norms, right? Maybe kids that were away from home are suddenly like, wait, you want me to do chores? And you know, I'm in a dorm. I'm used to like not cooking a meal, but now with younger siblings, I can't just tease and annoy, like what? So we all had to adjust, as many of us, I'm sure, had a lot of fascinating adjustments to make as we navigated, you know, these interesting, I'm going to say interesting. There's a lot of other adjectives, but we're going to go with interesting for now, these times. And I overheard once, we were suddenly plunged into a place of figuring out how to make Passover Seders safely for the students that were left behind, the ones who, in fact, did not stay at home from spring break, because students left for spring break, right? We're on a campus, our city pretty much empties, and then the university closed right away. And now how do the 20 that are left behind, many of them had parents that were older, they didn't want to go home and God forbid get their parents sick. Many had to work, couldn't leave, some were international students. So we had around 25 students left. And so now how are we navigating these norms in April when none of us know anything, right? It's arguable as to whether we still know right now, but we do know that there is a God still, and we're in good hands. But through the frustration, we ordered 30 Seder kits to go, and we're packing them up. And the 2 days before, that number jumps from 30 to 67. 30 to 67. And suddenly we're scrambling to gather materials, containers, labels, packing, and the whole family's in a frenzy. And an additional layer, we're not doing Passover as our, Control C, Control V, our usual way. So we've got to come up with new systems and how we're pulling off Passover. Now at home with just the family, like this is not 100 people, like at our Seder, 120, what's going on? And in one of the very frustrating moments of exhaustion and crankiness, one of the younger kids says, I hate this. So she wasn't talking to me. So I've learned as a parent, sometimes pretend you don't hear everything. You don't have to get involved in everything. And I noticed that her older brother was nearby. And so he says, hate this. Whoa, hate's a strong word. She says, yeah, I hate this. I hate always doing for others. I don't like it. It's hard, and not everyone appreciates it. And they RSVP at the last minute, and now I'm scratching. Now everyone has to work really, really hard, and everyone's stressed out. And I heard her brother send a message which told me that the value of Tzedakah, of being a giver, clicked. He said to her, you're right, it's hard, and you're right, it's annoying, and you're right that there are many that don't even realize or appreciate how hard this is. But wouldn't you rather be a giver? Wouldn't you rather be helping others? It's much better to be a giver than a taker. And she grumbled, but she stopped. And she didn't say it again. So it was so interesting to see how this 20-year-old who was raised here, always others first, right? Realize the gift of being a giver. And what Tzedakah does is it trains us to be givers. And it trains us to pay attention to all the gifts we have in our life, because Tzedakah is many, many formats. There's definitely a hierarchy of how much you give, a hierarchy of who you give to first. What if you know that there's a country, far away, and they're hungry, but what about your neighbor who, just started GoFundMe because they're starving, right? How do I prioritize? Who do I give to first? Do I give to the person down the street? What about my parent? If my parent is needs help with rent or medical care. So there definitely halacha, Jewish law, gives us a really clear outline of who to give and how to give and what to give, right? Or if I'm going to give so much that I'm not going to have a home on my own, that's a problem, right? So for sure, there is a structure that makes a lot of sense. And we could go through some of that tonight because we want to know how to do this. but ultimately it conditions us to be thinking of others at all the fundamental moments in our lives. The day of a wedding, to be thinking of others. There's a beautiful story how Rabbi Akiva, the sage Akiva, his daughter's life on the night of her day of her wedding, everyone's buzzing around preparing for the wedding, right? And she sees a hungry man walk in and she gives him food. And then the night of her wedding, the next morning she finds that her hairpin that she's tucked into the wall actually had a poisonous snake. And she goes to her father and she says, look, and he says, what did you do yesterday? What incredible action did you take? She says, actually, I don't know, my wedding, I was busy, there's so much going on. He says, no, you must have, what did you? And she says, oh, actually, there was that one case where the hungry man walked off the street, right? And the florist is too busy and the caterer is too busy. Let's say the photographer, but I'm sure there wasn't a photographer, but everyone's busy with the wedding prep. The band is got to prepare, but she noticed a hungry person. And we know that during high holidays, we say Tzedakah, we say Tshuva Tefillah Tzedakah Mavirin et Ra Gezerah, that the Tzedakah itself can eradicate a negative decree. And so he knew there was a negative decree that poisonous snake, she managed to get rid of or kill accidentally, that she really was being saved from something. And it was that act of Tzedakah he taught her that brought around this incredible blessing in saving her life. Right? We say it as a congregation, it's the tshuva returning to our best essence, prayer, connecting to Hashem, and tzedakah, charity, really gives it. But charity is not it. You see, because charity means I'm very noble, I'm very philanthropic, I have X amount of money in my, bank account, or my fund, or my, my grant, whatever however my tzedakah is structured. And I'm so charitable or noble that I'm going to give. Tzedakah doesn't say that. We go to the root word of tzedakah, and what does it mean? Tzedek, justice. It's just, it's the right thing to do. So I often give this analogy to my students. I say, imagine you're sitting Shabbat Echabad, and I pass this beautiful tray of pulled brisket, or we're in the South, smoked brisket, right? Now you see this beautiful platter. It comes to you. Is it yours, the entire platter? No, you take what you need and you pass it on. Similarly, all the gifts, the materialism we have, we are entrusted. God relies on you and I to be givers. That all the money we have, yes, don't obviously, but 10% at least goes to tzedakah. I remember one of my kids, their tooth fell out, and they come, I didn't say tooth malach, $1 under the pillow. Mommy, what's 10% of $1? 10% of $1. I was like trying to explain to the child. They were young enough that they still were getting $1 from the tooth malach, right? The tooth angel. So clearly, if they're young enough for that, percentages weren't in their mind yet. And I said, well, we talked about how to take 10 cents from $1. And I said, what for it? I have to give tzedakah. I have to give meiser. I have to give a tenth. All my earnings I give. And it's so interesting because I have this conversation with students and they want to give, right? They want to be givers, but they say, okay, when I have my 401k, when I buy the ring, when we buy the house, I say, no. Start training yourself. You get Hanukkah money, give 10% to tzedakah. 10% doesn't belong to you. 10% is Hashem's way of saying, I need you to care for others. I need you to be a giver. I need you to be part of the solution. And then Jewish mysticism teaches us such incredible things about tzedakah, the power of it, okay? It's a really powerful mitzvah. It's something we can train a young child to do. I remember my kid walking down the street finding a penny. They didn't say penny, money. They said deka, because to them, the coin was deka. It was, we give it in the coin every day, part of before we start prayer, before we start our day and think about all the things we need, right? We stop when we think of others. So we're training ourselves, we're conditioning ourselves, and it's so fundamental. But what I wanted to share is that another layer to understanding tzedakah is that, let's say, I'm going to go back a few years, okay? I'm going to date myself a little bit. I remember when I babysat with $5 an hour. That was the going salary. So I would have to drive to the location. Gas had to be used, right? The car had to be used. I would have time blocked off on my schedule and I'd walk away with $5. So that 50 cents that I gave to Tzedakah wasn't just elevating those 50 cents, right? What I was doing was elevating the energy, the time, all matter, everything materialistic that was invested in earning that money. So it's not about the donation that you make. And of course, I know, any donation made to Beis Chana, we know what it does, right? It gives us incredible classes like this. It gives us opportunities to connect. It gives young college students opportunity to first connect with their Judaism. I have students now who went to snorkel and study 8 years ago, who now are getting married and ready to use a mikvah, or are having beautiful, beautiful Jewish homes because of inspiration that they gain. So when we're giving tzedakah, we're not just giving of our money, we're giving of our time, our effort, our energy, and the ripple effect of that is all impacted from that money. So other people can say money, oh goodness, such materialism, superficiality. And Judaism says, no, everything mundane is here for a reason and can be elevated and uplifted. And the highest level of uplifting materialism is tzedakah. Now, it's not always with money. I tell college students when they're inspired and they want to give tzedakah, I say, you know what? You can't give money you're not making. The only thing you're making right now is student loans, right? They're piling up. Mom and dad are paying their rent and their food. So you can volunteer your time. You can volunteer to tutor someone. There's so many ways to become a giver. But isn't it great to be a giver? We are so connected and aligned to why we're here when we're able to be a giver, when we're able to utilize our talents, our abilities. And it could mean, I know, Andalea, some of the young girls are helping you with PR and with videos. I know I got asked to make a video, right? So they're using their skills. They may not be able to take out a big checkbook. I mean, I don't know if they use checkbooks anymore, but Zelle, Direct Pay, Cash App, whatever it is, right? They may not be able to do so, but they're able to give of their time and their energy. So Tzedakah comes in many different forms, but always say to ourselves daily, am I able to be a giver? How can I be giving? And we know that when we raise it's never too late, right? So we can say, oh my goodness, my home, I don't have a Tzedakah box ever. Go out, get a Tzedakah box, take a cup, collect it. Now, obviously we know once the Tzedakah box is full, you haven't accomplished the job, right? You got to actually then, you can write out a check or make a donation. Let's say I count this Tzedakah box and it's $52. Then I will match up $52, write it out, make a donation to an organization that is prioritizing and helping people in a real tangible way. So tzedakah is something we do daily. It's something that's so fundamental and so the building blocks of who we are as Jews. $410 billion of Jewish money went to tzedakah in 2018. That's a lot. But let's remember, we want to prioritize our families. We want to prioritize, our siblings. We want to prioritize relatives, people in need, and always look out for ways. It's not always money. The highest level of tzedakah is actually giving someone a job or a skill so they can get a job, because then they're not reliant and dependent on tzedakah anymore. So many ways we can really let this seep into our psyche and seep into our daily habit. And I would say tomorrow morning, get a chance, get a tzedakah box. If you don't have one, get a cup, right? And put it in, because that's who we are. Hashem put us in this world to repair the world. And there's nothing more holy than taking the hard-earned money and using it for good to help others. And it's a great thing to be a giver. It really is. So may we be able to always be on the giving end. May we always be able to share with others. May we always have opportunities to continue to do good in this world. The world certainly needs, people who are giving. And you know what happens when you're a giver? You start to appreciate also everything that you have, because you start to realize there are those who have less than you. So here's some of the ideas, some of the thoughts. There's for sure more. Again, we're not covering, this. There's volumes of learning about the levels of tzedakah and how much and how little and who first. I mean, fascinating. If there's a wealthy person who loses all their money, you could think, okay, I'll just give them bread and water. you actually have to help them maintain their level of lifestyle because that's their norm, with dignity, with respect. So there's so much sensitivity in the laws of tzedakah giving, but one thing's for sure, it's so part of who we are, and it's been part of who we are for thousands of years. 76% of Jews gave money in the year, like the last time they did an assessment, 76% were saying, I consistently give. It's the building blocks. We're meant to repair the world this way. Any questions or thoughts or ideas? Because I threw a lot out there. There's so much more to cover. And it's something that is, detailed info about Tzedakah. Okay, so Ahuba, can you ask more of a specific question? Maybe unmute yourself, because maybe there's something we can answer tonight. For sure, I mean, you can go, there's like 8 levels of giving Tzedakah, right? You know, the top one is giving someone a job, and the next one is that the giver and the recipient both have no clue who is the money coming from. Actually, a Tzedakah box is a perfect example of that, right? Because when I give in a Tzedakah box and then I'm going to give it to an organization, I have no idea who I'm giving it to, and that person has no idea where that money came from. So giving a coin in Tzedakah box is really great. Are there any specific questions? Because I think maybe we can answer them tonight together.
Well, I mean, just some of the things you shared already were fascinating.
Feel free to unmute yourself, Ahuba. Okay.
Can you hear me?
It takes time to figure out all these things, but there's, I would say, 8 levels of giving tzedakah. We want it to become a habit. We want it to become part of our day. But on the other hand, when we pass someone, you know, on the street who looks hungry, we should feel something. We should feel a level of compassion. And if someone asks us, we should give. And I have to say, the laws of agriculture in the way the laws of agriculture are structured. And, oh, you guys hear, I don't hear you. Okay, you hear me now? Sorry.
We can hear you.
Okay, wow, you know what I just realized? It's all my tech savviness. It was super quiet because, you wanna hear something funny? In order to not hear reverb, I muted my computer. So I couldn't hear anyone. So if anyone else said something and it seemed like I was ignoring you, I actually was not ignoring you. I was wondering why it was so quiet. It was so quiet.
Manya,
Yeah, sure.
I just want to say, I learned once that if you see a beggar in the street and you give them money, you have to, the minimum you have to give them is for a small meal, like a slice of pizza or something.
That's interesting. I'm actually not sure. I would love to actually look at that. I
Yeah,
know
I don't know where it came from, but it was some class, and that's what.
I mean, it certainly makes sense that you would want to give someone something that they can actually do something substantial. I've actually gone in the habit, if I see someone, you know, if it's outside a supermarket and I've seen someone, I'll say to them, you know, what can I buy you? Or can I buy you dinner? And I'll buy them, like, you know, a loaf of bread or some deli meat or something, like buy them something that they can eat. So that's a beautiful thing to, I love it, but I didn't research that, so I'm not sure, but it certainly makes sense that you would want to provide for them more than just like, here's a coin. And obviously also, we have to also be sensitive when we're givers, right? No one ever likes to be on the receiving end of someone who's doing them a favor or a kind or a nicety and they're resentful, right? If you're resentful about it, it's going to trickle down into your actions, right? You ever had someone to do a favor for you and you knew they didn't want to? Ew, right? It's a yucky feeling. So similarly, by the way, for ourselves, we got to work on ourselves. When we have to be a giver and we don't really feel it, we got to recenter ourselves and be like, why don't I feel it, right? Because it's not ever pleasant to receive from someone who doesn't want to give. Any other questions about this specifically within, or comments? Because that was a fascinating comment about giving, can't turn away a beggar, right?
Is there a blessing for that tzedakah?
You know, that is a really good question. The answer is no, not for this. When you're giving a coin in tzedakah box, you don't make a bracha, no.
I have a question, Manya. You
Yeah,
said that you can give your time. Is that if you don't have income, or can you give time instead of income?
So it's an interesting thing. So I would say that income 10%, you would want to, I remember once our students asked George Rohr, is a very well-known philanthropist. And actually, if you call him a philanthropist, he'll get he does not like the word. He says, that's not, I'm giving tzedakah. And a student said, how do you spend so much on us, right? You invest in us so much. And he said, I look at my money that comes in, that 10% doesn't belong to me. And I know people who actually 10% of their income, just as let's say the amount you'd give for taxes, is not yours. She said 10% of her income, they put in a separate bank account, and that's their Tzedakah bank account. And aside from the coins that they give daily, when there's someone in need, they know there's X amount on an account they're able to give. So it's interesting. And I think everyone has to ask themselves, I would say, my answer to you is probably both, right? You want to give your time and your, energy, but if you have funds that you could give some of your salary, and it's interesting, it's one of the mitzvot that Hashem says, I'm going to pay you back for it. Like, don't worry that I'm going to give tzedakah and then therefore I'm not going to, one of my favorite children's books, and I have to tell you, I read it to my Sinai Scholar students. And if I had it in front of me, I would do story time in the storybook. It's about a young girl who's walking and she passes a little nook, a little stall where the man is repairing shoes. And she says, you're fixing shoes. An old man, it's raining. She ducks and she says, you're fixing shoes, but your shoes are old. That makes no sense. So he said, let me tell you a story. And he tells her a story that it was during the war and his father was a shoemaker. And his father taught him how to make shoes with leather and string, everything. And then his father was called to the fronts because that was a very typical tactic in those days. A lot of young men were drawn up to war, certainly, in Russia, and put in the fronts. And his father was there, and now suddenly he's the oldest, and there's no food and there's no shoes, and dad's not coming back. So he remembers his dad showed him how. And so he goes around and makes shoes for people. And now suddenly he's conflicted. He's confronted with an issue. He has, and looks down at his feet. He's grown. He's a young man. And he has enough leather for one more pair of shoes, but his shoes on his feet are holes and are ripping. And so what should he do? So he makes himself a pair of shoes. And just as he's about to close the shop, and he says, okay, at least now I'll go door to door and fix shoes. I need to help my mom put food on the table for the family. And as he's about to leave the shop, in comes a man and says, I need shoes. Looks very desperate, very worried. And he says, you need shoes? I don't have. He says, what about those? He said, those are mine. He said, well, if I don't have them, my family's going to starve. You don't understand. I go out to the woods at night and I collect little pieces of wood and I save them and I sell them for firewood. And that's how my family will starve without these shoes. And the boy said, but I have to travel around by foot and my family will starve. And the boy said, why don't we share the shoes? And for months they shared the shoes. He wore them by day and the man wore them at night. And one day the man never came back and he didn't know what to do. He had no shoes and it was rainy and it was cold. And he just said, okay, I'm going to go barefoot. And one day, 2 days, 3 days. And as he starts on his way barefoot, in walks the man with a stack of leather and all the materials. The war had ended and he brought him as a thank you, new material to bring them. And so the girl said, wow, that's an incredible story. What happened to the shoes? He said, you see those shoes on my feet? I make them really well. I never had to make another pair. And I wear them to remind myself this lesson. You never have too little to give to someone else. And that's powerful. So I think everyone has to check in with themselves. No one's going to say, don't pay your mortgage because you're, putting food on taking care of someone else. Obviously, we have to make sure there's food on our table. And we have to prioritize our family, our parents, our children, our relatives. For sure. But if we know we have, always take a look, 10%, can I do it? And it's an exercise and it takes training, but it's certainly, again, a wonderful thing to be a giver. So we can ask ourselves, how can I give? How can I make this a part of my habit? We do it before prayer. Before we stop and think about all the things I need and my issues, we stop and we think of others. Before we make challah, before we light candles, we put in our daily prayer. It's daily responsibility. It's not a mistake that it's a daily responsibility.
Manya, can I just clarify something?
Yes, sure.
You said it, but just to make sure it's clear to people,
Sure.
that there's the mitzvah of taking at least a tenth of your earnings.
Yes.
And there's also the mitzvah of giving tzedakah every day.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We want to give a coin every day because every single time that coin hits that thing, there's that mitzvah, there's that connection, there's that bond, there's that reminder of that higher responsibility and the connection between you and Hashem. And there's that synthesis between spirit and matter at that moment when we're giving tzedakah. Yes, and again, that's aside from, but these coins are not my salary. Hopefully I'm earning a little more, right? So, but again, it's training ourselves. So for